Do I sound okay?
You sound great.
For sure?
hmm
Okay. Let's do it.
You're listening to Good is in the Details. I'm Gwendolyn Dolske,
And I'm Rudy Salo.
and this is the podcast where we learn what we didn't know in the spirit of Socrates, all with the aim of a happy life. And no, I'm already stumbling. Today's episode, we are going to follow up on the last episode where we talked about critical thinking at the end of 2025. In light of the current cultural and political and legal climate right now, we just wanted to take a moment to talk about ways that we can be thoughtful, exercise our critical thinking skills. What does that really mean? And, just take a moment to acknowledge that there's a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of fighting. Yeah, we're gonna get through this. We're doubling down on our mission with public philosophy that thinking and communication, reason is a healthy thing. So we
Absolutely.
want to
Especially,
participate in that by doing this.
that's right. We think it's critical, speaking of critical thinking skills, to put out an episode like this in this time when, for the first time ever, one of the first times ever, a lot of people are feeling very uncomfortable and they're wondering what they can do, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. I mean, ultimately, that's a personal choice, but you need to think critically about everything that's going on. You need to think critically about the choices that you make, the things that you post, the places where you go, and also, trying to get a better understanding of these difficult times. And we'll get into that a little bit. But Gwen, right before New Year's, you put out a little mini lecture. We plan on doing more of those little mini lectures. And I asked you to put out that little mini lecture. Let's call it an introduction to critical thinking skills. Okay. And one of the things I was thinking is go on to Google, which is what I'm doing right now.
The Googles.
Um, Google's and just type in critical thinking skills, right? These days, everybody is searching and they're spitting out artificial intelligence responses. Google is doing it. It's great. I use it all the time. But this is nothing against Google. I use Google. But you go and you type into Google, and this is what the AI overview of critical thinking skills is. Critical thinking skills involve objectively, it's a big word there, analyzing, evaluating, and interpreting information to form reasoned judgments, going beyond surface level acceptance to question assumptions, identify biases, and consider multiple perspectives. Very important there, multiple perspectives for effective problem solving, innovation, and decision making in all aspects of life. Key skills include observation, interpretation, evaluation, self reflection, clear communication, and questioning sources, all aimed at understanding complex situations and forming well supported conclusions. Gwen, what say you?
So let's say the first characterization according to Google was what? And then let's see, I
Yeah,
can
that's great.
expand on that point by
You know what
point.
I will do? I will share my screen. I will share my screen. Give
Oh,
me give me
fancy. I have to
permission to
click
share my
allow.
screen. Okay, click allow. Give me that permission. Give it to me. Give it to me. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen, Gwen, and you're going to quickly analyze this. So here it is. I am sharing this
Yeah, I
screen.
gotta
Can you
put my
see
glasses
this?
on for this, Rudy. Okay.
We are getting older, hopefully, and we're hopefully trying to pass on that wise. Glasses are on. So Gwen, there you go. It's right in front of you.
Okay, objectively analyzing and interpreting information from reasoned judgments, going beyond surface level. So let's just say, let's talk about data for a second. This would be a good example for this first part of analyzing and evaluating objectively. So we want to talk about context. For example, we are just so proud of Good is in the Details when it makes the American charts, which means that it cracks in the top 200. Now, for somebody who's not familiar with podcasting, that doesn't sound all that great, right? Like you came in near 200th place, but then when you step back and say, well, wait a minute, how many podcasts are out there? It's like 3 million, right?
Sure, 3 million.
Yeah,
I understand the point.
3 million.
Right?
So
You
that
were to look at the what a comparison.
Yeah, so that objective fact of, oh, okay, good is in the details, it cracked the top 200, doesn't sound all that exciting until you take a look at the context of that fact. And so then that fact gets a lot more exciting. I'll give another example of a statistic that has gone around, and this has to do with arguments that are regarding transgender surgeries. There are numbers of people who regret their transition after the surgery. And so those stories are highlighted. Now, that is an objective fact. People will go through the transition, and there is a percentage of people who regret it. And then people take that percentage and then they run with it. But if you were to back up and see what are the percentages of people who regret knee surgery, hip surgery, heart surgery, breast augmentation, stuff like that, the number in comparison is minuscule to those other surgeries. So we want to take a look at the context of things before we go ahead and jump on a number. What are the other numbers? What is the comparison? That's another example that comes to my mind. Without the context, it implies something other than what is true.
I think the point here is whenever you're getting percentages, whenever anybody is coming to you with that, stop and ask yourself, okay, what does this compare to and what are the numbers? What I'm trying to do is give some examples of, well, how can I apply this in my daily life, right? Like how this goes to another question that I want to ask on here, Gwen. In general, it sounds like you're agreeing with that the AI overview is pretty good, but you're trying to apply it. The other thing that I want to ask is, can critical thinking be trained? And if you follow the AI overview here, you follow these steps, is this something that can be done in training? And I'm not just talking about training in a classroom with a teacher and student. I'm talking about in like jobs. How does one get trained in critical thinking skills?
Yeah. So another good example, like let's say you're in marketing. When you are looking at your product or who your target is, you also have to take into consideration not just what you are doing, but what other people who are in that same business doing. And so that is the way in which you can find what is your target audience. So I would say that in everyday life, when it comes to the critical thinking, what you need to do, or in business or in work, you have to examine the other possibilities, the other angles, and the context. And so when you have a definition like this, which is great, what Google cranked out works, the action of it is far more difficult. It's not always easy because we get so wrapped up in whatever it is that we want to say and we want to prove that we don't stop and say, wait a minute, is there another causal factor that could explain this? Or somebody who disagrees with me or has another point of view, what would their argument be? And then examine it. I'll give you an example. This comes straight from philosophy. And this is from a dialogue. It was written by Plato. It's called the Euthyphro. I've probably mentioned it a couple of times because I really, really love it. But Euthyphro was an 18-year-old lawyer. He meets the 70-year-old Socrates, and Euthyphro declares that he knows the definitions of piety and impiety perfectly. And Socrates is like, oh, tell me more. What is the definition? And one of Euthyphro's tries, he says, well, piety is what pleases all the gods, and impiety is what displeases the gods. And then Socrates says, okay, well, we know that the gods disagree and that they quarrel and they hate each other. Euthyphro says yes. So Socrates says, so what kind of a disagreement would lead to hatred and quarrel? Would it be a disagreement about numbers? Like, let's say you and I, Rudy, were out to lunch, and afterwards I say I owe 25 and you say, actually, you owe 28. And I'd say, I think I owe 25. And you'd say, no, it's 28. Now that's a disagreement, but we wouldn't end up in a fisticuffs over it, right? The reason is because we would get the receipt and it would just be very easy. So we're not going to fight about the height of things, about the distance of things. There is a number. So then Socrates is saying, so then what kind of a disagreement would lead to hatred? And I asked the students, I write it up on the board. I said, we don't have to debate these things, but can you imagine two people sitting down to have a conversation about a topic and then walking away and hating each other or never wanting to speak to each other again? And then up on the board, we start listing things. Right now, a hot topic, of course, is the role of ICE that just came up. Abortion, LGBTQ plus rights, marriage, immigration, Greenland came up. Never thought I'd be writing Greenland on the board. Second Amendment rights. And then I say, okay, let's step back. And what is it that people are really fighting about when they're fighting about these things? Because they seem radically different. Like, what does Second Amendment rights have to do with Greenland, for instance, or have to do with immigration? Or what does abortion have to do with the role of ICE? How can all of these topics, they must have some common thread. And when you look at them, I think we can communicate with each other a lot more effectively if we appreciate this and understand this. At the heart of all of those disagreements that would lead to quarrels is a disagreement about what we think it means to live. That is what we're fighting about. What does it mean to exist? What does it mean to live rightly? What does it mean to live justly? So, for example, with Second Amendment rights, I mean, you have people saying, I have the right in a free country to protect myself. I can own this. I can do that. That is my right. And then somebody who is opposed to that is saying there needs to be regulations. I have the right to not be shot. I have that right. And what they are really fighting about is the idea of what it means to live in your home and to walk and to exist. Same thing with abortion. You have people saying, this is a life. You cannot take it away. And then other people are saying, this is the woman's body. You don't have the right to impose that she create another being. And what they're really fighting about is the definition of life and what is right. I think that when we can kind of step back and understand that that's at the heart of it, then we can maybe diffuse some of the anger and then accept that there is that different viewpoint of what it means to live and be human and be right. I don't know if that was helpful, but
No, I do think that was helpful, and I do think in these difficult situations, and everybody is angry these days. Any loss of life is very difficult to swallow as an American. It's not that it's not like people aren't dying throughout the entire world. Yes, people are dying throughout the world, but what happened this past weekend, a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are shocked. A lot of people are hurt. I can only imagine what the family of the individuals that have lost their lives in Minnesota feel these days. But if we're applying critical thinking skills to what happened in this situation, and if we're trying to objectively analyze it, and it's difficult because the videos are still coming out, people are trying to look at it. And it seems here that like one thing that probably is true is we don't know what training the ICE officers had. And we don't know if they were properly trained for a situation that occurred here. Could it have been a lack of proper training? I mean, we don't know, right? Right now, we don't have all of the facts to analyze it. I also know that in a situation like that, where there are firearms and there are, tensions rising, people trying to help other people that they think are hurt, but they happen to be armed and they have the right to be armed. But once you are armed, that probably raises the tension levels up a number of notches. And when you're in that situation, you're trying to do your job, whether you agree with that job or not. It's probably a difficult situation to stop and think critically. So I'll ask you, Gwen, how do you apply critical thinking skills in those moments where you don't have a lot of time to think and possibly your life may be put into harm? Like how are you able to do that on a moment's notice? Is there an exception to the critical thinking skills rules when you're either in a dangerous situation, you put yourself into a dangerous situation because you're doing your job or you're choosing to be someplace? Like, I'm just curious, like, how do you apply critical thinking skills in very difficult situations?
So in answering that, I'm going to point to this second part from the definition about surface level acceptance. Okay. So I have feelings about this. So I don't want anyone to think that I don't have any feelings and that I'm being cold. I'm only doing it for the sake of clarity.
We need
Yeah,
that right
I'm
now,
only doing
Gwen.
it for the
I
sake
mean,
of
I
clarity.
have my own feelings here, and we try to
Yeah.
make the show as apolitical as possible. But that's what we need. We need you to do that right now.
Yeah. The first thing that we have is, of course, we have the event, and then what seems to be the surface level are the immediate causal factors. The discussion doesn't seem to be going any deeper than that. And so, what I would do is say, okay, the existence of ICE, the motivation and their work and what they want to accomplish What is that position? And where is this idea of anyone who is not American needs to leave immediately? What is the source of that concern that would then drive a movement to have a particular group of people employed in order to remove people who are not American in a violent and fast fashion? And then when we can kind of get down to that, why is it that people oppose people who are not born in this country to be in this country? We can probably unearth some fears, some bias that is right there, because the feeling part of me will, cry and then want to go scream. And that will not accomplish anything because I am only thinking about my point of view. But if I really want to look at the causal factors of what led up to this, I can't just isolate it. I have to take a look at, well, wait a minute, how did we even get to that immediate situation? I would say with our critical thinking skills is to examine what are the reasons that people are so opposed to a foreign born person existing in the United States, and have honest conversations about that. And people will have to be honest with themselves, the people who are supporting this movement. What is the reason that somebody who is not born in this country should not be here? And then you can have discussions about, well, a country has laws, must have borders. But I think that another thing we should pay attention to is that when it came to Renee Good, for instance, there are several camera angles. One of those camera angles, it appears that she hit the officer with the car. But if you look at the other camera angles, we see that that was an illusion. The same kind of illusion that would be done in filmmaking. If the camera is at a particular angle, you can have two actors look like one slapped the other on the face. And then the other person just turns their head, but there's no contact that is made. And the camera angle makes it possible so that it appears to us as the audience that the person actually was hit in the face. But that's not what the actors were doing. And that camera angle where it appears that the agent was hit by her car is with that same illusion. People will run with that and be very heated about that. And then their emotions get out of control without considering that there's another angle. It's actually like a perfect metaphor for what critical thinking is. It's like, what is another angle? And it's not just like a two sides debate, it's several sides. There's a lot for us to think about. So I think that with the Renee Good case, that would be a really good example of running with very limited information and the making of a lot of claims. With this other incident with the nurse, there are the arguments, well, he was carrying, but you can also see from the video footage that he was disarmed. And after being disarmed, then he was shot multiple times. So the fact that he was carrying it is not a just cause for what happened. And I'm saying it like as neutrally as possible, but it's hard. And I don't think, Rudy, the reason why, like, we're all supposed to just go back to work, like here we're podcasting. We have seen so much violence in such a short period of time. I don't think we're meant to see it. Like, I don't think that I'm meant to just witness the death of somebody on social media and then just go about my day. That's the hard part.
No, it definitely is the hardest part, and that's why we're putting out this episode. And I've been having very difficult conversations with my own family about this. I have my own upbringing, my own experience, my own reactions, just from what I've seen throughout my own life and how I'm dealing with the chaos. And I thought it was important for us to put this out here and hopefully try to, I don't know, bring some like, hey, how do we deal with this? Well, here's one way to try to deal with it. Let's try to stay positive, stay as full as humanly possible, and move forward in the ways that we feel that we can do so on a daily basis. We can't get paralyzed. We have to learn how to continue on with our jobs. We have to continue to think critically about what's happening, and we have to think critically about, if I have a problem with this, how do I peacefully and rightly help usher in change? Should I want to have a change? And that's a really personal choice.
For you in law, what is some advice that you could give? Because in practicing law, you have to know what opposing counsel, the way in which they are going to view that evidence. What are some strategies that would be part of a legal practice that every person can do? Like you have an argument, you have a position. How is it that you prepare and understand what the opposition is going to say, like how they're going to read the evidence? What are like the mental practice there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I
Thank you.
mean, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of lawsuits that result from this. And what we're seeing right now is certain narratives, right? Certain narratives, people are being branded for the very first time, probably in their life, domestic terrorists, if they oppose one side, and that's probably very unsettling for them. I have my own views on that. I've talked about thousands of times and on podcasts and in many articles about how, like, if you grow up Arab American here in the United States, you're pretty much branded a terrorist at birth. I know that's kind of silly and it's kind of very wide swath, boo-hoo, but the reality is, like, well, I've dealt with it, and I'm okay, and that's not something that's going to. I know I'm American, and I just want others to, just because somebody labels you something, doesn't mean that that's what you are when you're exercising your rights for free speech. But I also do think that you got to think again about yourself, about your future, about your jobs, about how other people are going to interpret things. And you have to make choices. You have to critically think about the choices that you make. And it's very, very important to try to be as dispassionate as possible, even in these difficult times. That's the best piece of advice I could give. I know that wasn't a legal answer, preparing for cases and stuff like that. That's a personal answer.
I mean, I get it. Like, this is just a rough time. I think, the other thing I want to focus on here is the bias part. That's part of this answer from Google. I was thinking about this the other day. One of my students asked me about me being Catholic, if I practice it, because I don't think that I realized, but that I mention a Catholic school upbringing often. And I answered her honestly. And then the reason why I think that I bring it up is to be aware of my own potential bias. What I mean by that is that even though that because I was raised with a particular religion, that even though, I've got my PhD in philosophy, I've traveled, I've studied other religions, that is my initial framework of understanding the world. It would be disingenuous of me to not recognize that. And that as much as I would want to eliminate some kind of a bias, there will always be a hint of that in my lens of the world and of goodness and rightness. Like there will always be a hint of it. And so acknowledging your own bias is also an important step, because the religion, the economic background, I mean, there are so many things that you are born into, the geography, right? Your citizenship, there's the religion, there's so many things that you're born into. And even though you can maybe shed layers of that and see other points of view, it's almost like when you learn a second language, no matter how good you are at that second language, you'll still have a bit of an accent from the original one. And I think that that's what we need to look at with bias. It's your accent, if you will. The strength and the depth of that accent is up to you when it comes to practicing. In the same way, like no matter how much I practice French, my God, I still sound like an American. I can't get rid of it. I've been laughed at for it. But it is true. It's because my primary first language is English. And so no matter what, that will always have that accent. And I think it's the same thing with recognizing what is the framework in which you were born into. And this includes language, because language sets up the way in which you describe the world, you understand the world. When you are looking at situations like what's going on in Minnesota, I have to accept the fact that I'm walking in with a bias. Then acknowledge that and make sure that I'm clear about it for myself before I engage in conversations with others or I look at the evidence. The bias isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's an accent. But if you are not aware of it, then you'll sound silly. That's what I want to say about it. And there's all sorts of different biases, but the way that our world is set up right now, it's almost with our social media and our news cycle, it's leaning into our biases instead of challenging them. If you have a particular view of the world of thinking that something is right or wrong, then pay attention to if you're only consuming material that legitimizes that, because that means your bias isn't being challenged, and it has to be challenged.
And that
Yeah.
includes obviously political bias, right? And
Oh,
on
yeah,
social
yeah, yeah.
media, if you lean a certain way, like you have one way or the other, just political bias, you have to try. If you really care and you're really trying to be objective, the only way to do so is to try to understand all sides of the issue. If you take in all of the sides and your conclusions and your feelings are still validated, great. But you do need to do that, right, Gwen?
Yeah. My upbringing, I mean, like we've got Orange County, California. I mean, being Republican is practically part of the water. It's in the water. And it wasn't until like maybe my 20s, I think it was from living in Belgium, that then there was a very big shift in my political point of view. But I think sometimes people are surprised because they see like the me now that's entrenched in a particular point of view, that then they are a little bit surprised at my understanding or even defending some political views that are other than my own or explaining them. And the reason is because I grew up, with a particular frame of thinking when it came to politics, that no matter how much I've learned or I've shifted, I still recognize that those were my roots and that that is still part of my accent. I think that it's different for people who grew up with one political point of view in a political family and then they're adults and then that's the only way of seeing things. I mean, I'm learning every day, Rudy. Like there's times when I have a bias and I didn't even realize it. I didn't even realize that I was seeing things in a particular way. When it comes to feminist thought, for instance, that white women approach it very differently than women of color. And I have to accept that there is a bias, an accent, if you will, when I am reading literature when it comes to women, because even to talk about feminism, to lump all women into one group, that's not true. As a white woman, I have a different reality than a woman who is Asian, than a woman who is Black, than a woman who is Arab. There are different struggles and realities. And so I have to be aware of those kind of biases, and which can show up in neglecting the existence of other points of view. Sometimes that's the way the bias shows up. It's important for our neighbors and so that we can be good citizens. Even our pamphlet, when it comes time to voting on the propositions, it has the arguments for and against. I put it as a critical thinking exercise to my students. I advise people to read that and then to also see the source of that literature. Who benefits from a particular law? Now, a benefit isn't necessarily a bad thing if it's a corporate benefit, but it's important to go ahead and examine. We have that in our literature, but of course, people don't seem to have the attention span to read something for longer than 10 minutes. Read something longer than a meme. But I think that a good exercise for everybody would be next time you get those pamphlets in the mail for how you should vote on the propositions, read the pros and the cons. First of all, like we said, we want to acknowledge that our news feed is weighing on us and we're right with you. It's weighing on us. It is very difficult to, I don't know, just see something on social media of an extremely violent act. And then right before that, I'm supposed to pick up my daughter from school. And when she comes running out of school, just smile and be like, I'm so happy to see you, and pick her up. When I felt like breaking down into tears just a second before because I saw something so awful. Or even just walk into a classroom, have a lecture. Like I didn't just get an email from the university that we should be aware that there might be a presence of ICE on campus, or that there's a meeting of faculty of what to do if you're doxxed, right? I still have to walk into the classroom with the weight of all of that, do my job and teach them, be part of their intellectual development. All of us are having a hard time. And I just want to, like I said, double down on our role as a public philosophy podcast, where when people tune in here, they know that they get to learn something new and that they get to be more thoughtful about anything from film to history to books to medicine to wellness. We will always be here as an outlet for you to think in a richer way and learn how to. And the biggest ways, I think the takeaway from this is, first, whenever somebody throws out a number or a stat at you, give yourself a broader picture of the context of that stat. And when it comes to surface level assumptions, take a step back and see, what is the origin of the idea? What are people afraid of? What do people love? And when you can start to address that, what do people care about? Because all this other stuff is an expression of that: fear, love, and care. All of this, whether it's the Second Amendment rights, the role of ICE, Greenland, immigration, abortion. At the heart of it is that. And so when we can start to think about what is it that we fear, love, and care about, then we can understand why we have that's expressed in these ways. And when we can value that that's at our heart, then we can understand where somebody else is coming from. And then with our own biases, just recognize it's not a bad thing. It's a natural thing to have a bias. It's an accent. But if you're not aware of it, then that can lead you to buying into things that are not of any value for your mental, emotional, spiritual, or intellectual well-being or for your community. If you think that somebody is just, like a politician is running for office and they're of the party that you don't agree with, and you just want to say all the terrible things about it, just take a second to hear the people who like that person who are voting. Why do they like that person? Because you might be missing something. Why do they like that person? I think that critical thinking, we think about wanting to advance our own arguments, but what we need to do is understand what other people are arguing for a better society, I think. Rudy, do you have any thoughts? Did I just ramble?
No, you did very, very well. And I think that was great. And I think that this is
This is
a
hard.
critical show and very, very difficult. We're being very vulnerable here. We're putting ourselves out on the line. Hopefully, our fans get something good out of this. And we will continue to do some of these mini lectures going forward into the future because I think they're really critical, Gwen.
Yeah, I want to challenge everybody who's listening, whatever media source that they read, take a second to look at a media source that they're not as familiar with and just see, or even look at the international news. You can look at the Globe and Mail, the Canadian news, for instance. You can look at the British news. Just take a second to, because we want to say the how, like what's the step? Maybe that's a step. If you're used to just CNN, maybe try like The Economist that comes out of the UK and just take a moment to read it. That's the first step, I think. And we'll always be here. Also tune into Good Is in the Details. Download this, follow, share. And like I said, we are absolutely dedicated to participating in making the world a better place and putting content out there that makes your life good. That's what we want to do. Okay, Rudy.
And thank you for doing this.